Hi, what I'm going to show you today is how to make a Google form in a classroom setting. I'm in my Google Drive, but before I do anything to create my Google form, I want to show you where exactly I am. I'm at my account for my school, ridgewoodraters.com. I'm not at my personal Gmail account. I want to be on the same domain as my students, and since we're a Google Apps for Education school, that's ridgewoodraters.com. If you're a Google Apps for Education school, you want to be doing the same thing. Make sure that you're in an account that you share with your students. If that's not the case, you can still do a lot of the stuff I'm doing here today, but there'll be a few things that are different. All right, moving out of that, it is time to create a Google form. New, let's go down to more, and let's create a Google form. First thing let's do, let's make this a little bit colorful. Let's go over here to the palette and bring that up. You will notice there's an image here, 4 images. And there's all sorts of things you can choose from. We're doing work in school here, so let's see what's a nice school type thing to do. Oh, I like this one. I'll select that. And that will upload a theme that will affect how my form looks. Next thing I'm going to do is take care of a title and a description. Notice right now that my form is not titled, but if I go up here, it's going to grab the name of the form from the title I gave it there. So I'll keep that. Now the first thing I want to do when I'm creating my form is I want to look at that first question, and I want to collect the information about my students. So I'm going to go over here, and instead of having it be multiple choice, I'm going to have it be short answer. What I want to know is my student's first name. And I want this to be a required question. They have to answer this question in order to submit their work. So after I do that, I'm going to click here and duplicate that. Let's make this last name. Again, that's going to be required. Notice that you have these little dots here. If you want to, you can drag questions to be in different order, but I like first name in front of last name, so I'm going to use that. Okay, that's a required question. Now, over here is how you add everything. So for example, I want to add one more question, and I want my students to put in what period they're in. And I do want this to be multiple choice. Let's say I only teach 3 periods. So period 1, hit enter. Period 2, hit enter. Period 3, hit enter. And this also will be required. Note something here. You'll always see on multiple choice and checkboxes, which we'll get to later, this last option here, but it's not really there. Okay, so in particular, don't worry about this last thing. This is just where if I wanted to, I click on that. I could have period 4, but I don't want that, so I'm going to click on the X. All right, let's add a question. All right, I've added a multiple choice question. So you can see that I've got my question up here, and I've got possible answers down there. Again, I've got 4 options. Google Forms doesn't automatically label these A, B, C, D, or anything like this. You just have options. Let's do that one more time. I'm going to add a question, and I want it to be multiple choice. Here's my second question, and you might want to notice a couple of things as we're going through this. First off, Google Forms don't ask you which of these are the correct answers. You don't tell Google Forms that. That's something that you get to choose when you look at responses later. Secondly, you may have noticed that on these questions, I did not make them required. And the reason for that is, when I found them in the classroom, I do want to make sure I've got my student's name and period, but if some student is taking a long amount of time and I want things submitted, I do want them to be able to submit their work without necessarily answering all the questions. Okay, let's add a question and use a different type. So let's say we want checkboxes, and I'll add a question. Notice in this case what I've done is I've got checkboxes so they could mark several correct answers. In fact, the first one and the third one are correct. So different types of questions for different purposes. Let's talk about doing some different things inside a Google form besides adding questions. So let's look at the different things that we can insert here. I want to add a title and description. This is where I can just add some text. And of course, I can move these just like I could move the questions up above. Okay, let's go down here. Let's add an image. Now, this will bring up Google's insert image box, and there's all sorts of things you can do. You can click on here and choose an image from your computer to upload. You can upload by a URL, your Google Drive. I'll do a search. Let's see if I've got something that talks about the distributive property. I do. Let's put that in. And we'll insert that image, and I can even title it. And if you're really concerned about these things, you can talk about aligning it in different ways. And if you need to, you can also shrink the image. So that's nice. All right, another thing besides adding an image that we can do is we can add a video. Now this is going to take you to YouTube. Since I have a video in mind, I'll go ahead and search for it. Yay, there's the video I created. Please select that one. And it will load the video. And I can give some instructions. Let's talk about one more thing that we can do here. I'm not going to focus on adding a section. That's not something I do very often in my Google Forms. But let's talk about a couple more types of questions. So far, we've just been talking about things where you check something. It is, of course, okay to have a short answer or a paragraph type answer. So I might do something like this. How can you remember the distributive property? And give my students something where they've got lots of space to type. Let's say that's our Google form, and that's what we want. Let's do a couple of things here, just so you know what it looks like. Let's go up here and hit the preview. So this is what your students would see. Those little asterisks means that there are required questions. And you can see what the form looks like. Let's go back to the form, and now before we finish this, we have to talk about how we're collecting responses. Let me do a couple of things first. I'm going to go over to the settings. Now, this is where we were talking about Google Apps for Education. Because Ridgewood is a Google Apps for Education school, I can collect information. So I can automatically collect my student's username. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. That is very important. And then when they submit their work, it's going to give this response. Your response has been recorded. And I think it's very important to give them a link to edit their response. Again and again and again, I will have students who will click submit. They realize they've got the wrong answer. They want to go back and change their work. Please give them an opportunity to edit their response. So I'm going to save that. And now let's go over to responses. We don't have any responses yet because we haven't sent out the Google form. But we have to do a couple of things here that are very important. It is very important, if you want to save student responses, to select the response destination. This is going to create a Google Sheet in your Google Drive with all the answers in it. And I always go with create a new spreadsheet. It will always be named the name of the form, parentheses, responses. Go ahead and create that. We can even take a look at that by clicking on what the responses are. And of course, we don't have anything, but you can see the information that's going to be collected. When the form was answered, by whom, first name, last name, all the questions that we asked are going to be stored in this Google Sheet. All right, so what we've done, we can always, of course, go back to questions and make changes as we need to, but we have created a Google form. The next thing we want to do is figure out how to send this Google form to our students.